Hello everyone, what is up? Welcome back to another episode of Killer Instinct, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you're new here, hi, my name is Savannah and I'm your host of Killer Instinct. And before we get started, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you never miss an episode. We post weekly here on the podcast every single Wednesday. You're not going to want to miss it. We also upload the video version to YouTube on Wednesdays as well, so make sure you are subscribed. And if you're looking for more exclusive Killer Instinct content, we always post that over on our Patreon. We post an additional 3 full-length episodes a month, and we end the month with an exclusive live stream as well. You can always find those links in the description box below, or if you're a Spotify listener, you can find those videos embedded into the feed or at the top of the podcast page. Now, with that all being said, let's talk about the case we are here to go through today. As you can tell by the title of today's episode, today we are talking about the high-profile Idaho 4 murders. Today we are talking about the brutal murders of Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, Madison Mogen, and Kaylee Gonzalez. Now, I'm sure for many of you, this is not the first time that you are hearing of this case. I would actually be surprised for a single one of you if this was the first time that you were hearing of this case, considering the high profile nature of it. This case took place in 2022 and truthfully has been one of the most high profile murder cases that I have ever seen and one that I can really remember. I have waited to cover this case. I have not covered this case at all. I haven't touched this case. I've just been a follower of the case. When this case first took place, I did not cover it out of the simple and pure fact that I was scared. This case ignited a lot of fear in a lot of people for many different reasons. I think the biggest one being that this just personifies everyone's greatest fear, and it certainly did for me. And I told myself that I was going to wait to cover this case, and once an arrest was made and once talks of a trial were in play, I told myself that I would wait until after a trial took place and there was a conviction to cover this case. However, in light of recent news that I'm sure a lot of you have heard, if you follow this case, you would know that there is no longer a trial taking place, and we will get into all of those updates at the very end. However, because of that, I figured why not cover it now? So that is what we are going to be doing today. But before we get into it, I do want to take a moment and remind just everyone out there who follows this case, or not even this case, just any case in general, it's important to remember that everyone involved in this case, all of the victims, their families, the survivors of this case, they're real people. I know that sounds like a no duh. I know it sounds like an of course, we know that, but I think it's really important to remember with how high profile this case is and with how many eyes, ears, it's important to remember that these are real people, real families, they have real feelings, and they've all experienced an immense amount of trauma that most of us, if we're lucky, will never have to deal with or go through. I do think that now that this case does seem like it's coming to a little bit of a close, we can recognize that. And so I just wanted to put that little disclaimer out there because I think that in this case in particular, I've seen so much judgment. I've seen a lot of opinions being thrown around. I've seen a lot of criticism. And personally, I just don't think that that's right. Let's just remember that as we move forward. But with that all being said, let's jump right on into it today. Now, this case took place in an area called Moscow, Idaho. Now, Moscow is a city located in Latah County, and it sits on the west side of the state of Idaho near the Washington state border. And in 2022, when this case took place, the population of Moscow sat at around 22,000 people. Now, a good number of that population is made up from the students attending the University of Idaho. The University of Idaho has an overall enrollment approximately of 12,000 students currently. It is an energetic school that unites the town with its sports events, performances, and school spirit. Unlike other rural areas in Idaho, Moscow is considered to have more of an urban city feel. And for all things considered, Moscow is known to be a very safe, quiet town. It was a college town, but it always felt safe. Leading up to this case, there hadn't been a murder in Moscow in 7 years. So now that you have a little bit better of an understanding of Moscow, I want to talk about the victims in this case. The first victim is Kaylee Gonzalez. Kaylee was born on June 8th, 2001 in Concord, California, to her parents, Christy and Steve Gonzalez. She grew up alongside her 4 siblings, and from the second that Kaylee was born, she was full of life. Her personality was contagious, and she was the brightness in every room. She was always doing whatever she could to make those that she loved laugh. Kaylee was very social. She had a ton of friends and always wanted to make everyone feel included. She was very funny. She had a very goofy side to her. She loved to play pranks on her friends and her family, and she never took life too seriously, but her zest for life was really balanced out by her hard work. Kaylee attended Bora Elementary School with her brother and sister before moving on to Charter Academy for middle school, which is where she met her chosen sister and lifelong friend, Madison Mogan. Kaylee's family said that the day that Kaylee met Maddie, it was game over. They were no longer a family of 5. They were now an honorary family of 6. Maddie blended into their family beautifully, and she automatically fit right in. Kaylee and Maddie both attended Lake City High School before being accepted into the University of Idaho together, and Kaylee in particular was very eager to begin this next chapter of her life. While at the University of Idaho, Kaylee was majoring in general studies. She also got accepted into a sorority. She was a part of Alpha Phi. She had a full-time job, and she also was an amazing student. She really did it all. So much so that she was set to graduate early from the University of Idaho in December of 2022, only weeks after her murder. Kaylee had dreams to become an elementary school teacher. However, after college, she was planning to work an IT job in Austin, Texas. This was obviously a big move for her, but it was one that she was incredibly excited about. Now, Madison Mogan, our next victim, she was born on May 25th, 2001 in Eugene, Oregon, to her parents, Karen and Ben Mogan. Maddie spent the first 2 years of her life living in Oregon before her and her family decided to move to the North Idaho area, which is where her parents grew up. While living in Idaho, Maddie had a great childhood. She attended Winton Elementary School and then went on to attend Charter Academy, which is where, like I previously mentioned, she met Kaylee before the two went on to Lake City High School. Both Kaylee and Maddie's parents were actually very hesitant to send them to Lake City High School. However, they both were very persuasive. They actually wrote letters to both of their parents as to why they wanted to go, why they wanted their parents to let them go, and because of their determination, their parents allowed it. Now, Maddie was known for being a sweet and loving person. She was always making other people laugh and smile. She had this unforgettable sense of humor about her, and alongside that, she excelled in school. She was always on the dean's list. She had a 4.0. She was majoring in marketing, and she also joined Pi Beta Phi, the sorority, where she met some of her closest friends. While at the University of Idaho, Maddie also got a job as a server at a restaurant called the Mad Greek, located in downtown Moscow. Next, we have Xana Kernodle, and Xana was born on July 5th, 2002. Her birthday is actually tomorrow at the time that I'm recording this, and she was born in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, to her parents, Kara and Jeff. Xana grew up alongside her siblings. She attended Post Falls Middle School and high school, where she excelled in sports such as soccer, volleyball, and track. Xana was known to be a ball of energy. She was full of life. She was a free spirit. Something that Xana used to say was that the key to living life was enjoying the ride and not the destination. She loved going to concerts. Her favorite music was EDM. She loved going to any rave that she could. She also loved traveling, going on family trips. She loved being outdoors. And Xana was very social. She had a lot of friends, and she had a very positive and outgoing personality that just made people gravitate towards her. Now, when Xana enrolled at the University of Idaho, she also majored in marketing, and similarly to Maddie, joined the Pi Beta Phi sorority, and her and Maddie also worked at the Mad Greek together. And it was while at the University of Idaho that Xana met her boyfriend, who unfortunately is our 4th victim in this case, and that is a young man named Ethan Chapin. Ethan was born on October 29th, 2002, and he was actually born a triplet. He was the first to be born alongside his brother and sister, Maisie and Hunter, in Priest Lake, Idaho, to their parents, Stacy and Jim Chapin, and the family was raised in Conway, Washington. Now, as you can imagine, growing up a triplet is just full of joy and excitement for the entire Chapin family. All three of the triplets had a color. They had a distinct color that they would wear in order to distinguish themselves from the others. Maisie wore pink, Hunter wore orange, and Ethan's color was blue. Ethan fully encapsulated love. He was easygoing, he was kind-hearted, he always prioritized his family and his loved ones. His mom, Stacy, remembered how going back to early as kindergarten, Ethan was always the one that was getting all of the kids together on the playground. He always wanted everyone to feel included. He didn't want anyone to feel left out, and his family really does describe him as the grounding force for all of them. He was the glue. Now, prior to the murder, Ethan had worked at a tulip farm in Washington nearby his hometown. Ethan quickly made friends with everyone at the tulip farm, all of his coworkers, and he was incredibly hardworking. The CEO of this tulip farm actually said that he could put Ethan anywhere in the field doing the hardest jobs with the grumpiest of coworkers, and anyone that he was working with would automatically not be grumpy anymore. Their mood would instantly be lifted because Ethan would lighten their spirits. Some coworkers even said that even when they weren't scheduled, they would still go into the job just so they could be around Ethan. It was also said that Savannah and Ethan were so complimentary of each other. They were each other's yin and yang. Savannah was a ball of energy, while Ethan, again, had this very calming presence about him, and it set them up for a beautiful relationship together. Now, Kaylee, Maddie, Savannah, as well as their two other roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, they all lived together on a house located on 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. The girls also had an additional roommate named Ashlyn Couch, who had lived in the home as well. However, she moved out in May of 2022 after graduating and moved back in with her parents. So at the time of the murders, the house was occupied by Kaylee, Maddie, Savannah, Dylan, and Bethany. Now, it was actually Maddie who was the one who gathered her friends together to get an off-campus house, and everyone was really excited about it because who wouldn't want to live in a house with their best friends? It seemed like the perfect scenario. Maddie called the house on King Road the Barbie Dream House. There were so many memories at this house. There was always a party, a social gathering. Something was always going on at the house. Even if it was just the roommates hanging out together in the home, memories were constantly being created there. The house itself was a 3-level home. It had 6 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. There were 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom per each floor of the house. The first level sat on the ground level, and it had its own front door entry, and there were 2 bedrooms that were across from each other and a bathroom in between them on that first level. Now, only one of the bedrooms on the first floor was being occupied at the time of the murder, and that was Bethany's bedroom. So Bethany occupied the first floor bedroom of the home. Now, if you walked up the stairs from the first floor, you would obviously land on the second floor of the home. This floor also had 2 bedrooms. It had a living space as well and a kitchen. The 2 bedrooms on this floor were occupied by Savannah and Dylan. The second floor also had a sliding glass door located in the kitchen that opened up to the back patio of the home. Now, if you walked up the stairs from the second floor of the home, that is where you would end on, obviously, the third floor. Now, on the third floor is where Kaylee and Maddie had their own bedrooms. Now, at the time of the murders in November of 2022, Kaylee had actually recently moved out of the home. Like I mentioned, she was graduating early, so she had moved the majority of her stuff out of the house. However, on the specific weekend of November 11th, Kaylee had gone back to the home to stay there, hang out with her friends, her former roommates, see Maddie. Kaylee had also recently bought a new car. She bought a Range Rover, and it was something she was really excited about. She worked really hard for it, and she wanted to show it off to her friends. So she went back to the King Road home for the weekend. And the weekend itself was packed with several social events. It was obviously football season, so there was a game day, and on November 12th, the night prior to the murder, Ethan had accompanied his sister to a sorority date party and then met Xana at a Sigma Chi fraternity party later that evening before heading back to the house on King Road. Kaylee and Maddie spent their night at the Corner Club, which is a small pub in Moscow. They arrived shortly after 10 p.m., and at 1:37 a.m., the two left together and walked a couple blocks to a local food truck called the Grub Truck. They are seen on surveillance ordering their food, laughing. Everything seems very happy and fun and cheerful, and it just seemed like they were trying to end their night. At 1:49 a.m., one of the girls, Kaylee or Maddie, ordered a car service to come pick them up, and then that car service dropped them back off at the house at King Road at 1:56 a.m. Bethany and Dylan were also out that night. It was said that Dylan had seen Xana earlier at that fraternity party, and they arrived home shortly after 2 a.m., followed by Xana and Ethan. So everyone in the house was getting back around that 2 a.m. range. Now, phone records did show that around 2:26 a.m., both Kaylee and Maddie made some calls on their phones to their boyfriends before presumably calling it a night. Kaylee had also brought her dog Murphy to the house to spend the weekend with her and her roommates. This was a dog that she shared with her boyfriend and one that she absolutely loved. It is the cutest little dog, and she brought the dog to the house for the weekend, and it is presumed that around 2:30, everyone went to their rooms and was heading to bed for the night. So at the end of the night, Bethany was on the first floor, Xana and Ethan were in Xana's room, Dylan was in her room, and then Maddie and Kaylee were actually in Maddie's bedroom because, like I said, Kaylee had moved the majority of her stuff out, and her and Maddie just wanted to have a little sleepover, so they slept in Maddie's room with Kaylee's dog, Murphy. And what started out as a normal night for these college students and what seemingly ended as a normal night as well soon turned into a horrific, unimaginable tragedy. I know I'm not the only one who always feels the urge to refresh my closet every season, but I'm also not trying to waste money on pieces that I'll only wear once or even just for one season. I'm in this era of my life where I'm trying to elevate my wardrobe and really find my own personal style, and luckily, that's where Quince comes in. Their clothes are timeless, elevated, luxurious, and the quality is beyond anything that you'd expect for what the price is. Think 100% European linen tops starting at only $30. I'm talking washable silk dresses and skirts and soft cotton sweaters, versatile warm weather pieces you'll reach for again and again. And the best part is that everything with Quince is half the cost of similar brands. By working directly with top artisans and cutting out the middlemen, Quince gives you the luxury without the markup. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. Personally, this is a season of life where I have a lot of travel coming up. I have weddings, I have my own honeymoon, and so I recently picked up the Italian leather dual compartment toiletry bag from Quince, and let me tell you guys, it is the best decision I have made in a very long time. The quality is insane, the size is perfect, and it's going to be coming with me everywhere. Give your closet an upgrade with Quince. Go to quince.com/killer for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/killer to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/killer. Believe it or not, planning meals really can be simple and stress-free. Imagine having your week of meals already decided for you with personalized options that fit your lifestyle. That's what makes Hungry Root such a game changer in my house. Hungry Root takes the stress out of mealtime by planning a full week of meals tailored to your tastes, and it gets smarter with every order. With over 15,000 recipes to choose from each week, it's easy to find options that fit your whole family's taste and nutrition goals. Whether you're gluten-free, dairy-free, high protein, focused on gut health, or just about anything else, Hungry Root will help you stay on track. After taking a quick quiz, their Smart Cart technology builds a weekly menu that fits your needs. It's basically like having your own meal planner who just gets it. Hungry Root helps cut down on food waste and keeps you from defaulting to expensive takeout when the time's right. You get great value with thoughtfully planned meals, and with my offer, every delivery includes a free item like a premium protein, veggie, or sweet treat. treat. Hungry Root holds its ingredients to high standards as well, avoiding over 200 additives like high fructose corn syrup, preservatives, and artificial sweeteners. They use quality ingredients like hormone and antibiotic-free meat and seafood, organic produce, and non-GMO choices, so you can feel good about what you're eating. You guys know that in this season of my life that I'm currently in, I don't have the time to just constantly meal prep and plan out the week's meals, so Hungry Root has been a lifesaver. It has saved me so much time and mental energy trying to figure out my meals for the week. Not having to meal plan has truly been such a gift, and I get to take that time that it would normally take me to do so and put it all into wedding planning and focusing on my health goals, knowing that Hungry Root has got me covered. So take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box plus a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/killer and use code KILLER. That's hungryroot.com/killer, code KILLER, to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/killer, code KILLER. At 11:58 a.m. on November 13th, there was a 911 call placed by Bethany, Dylan, and their two friends, Emily and Hunter, to Moscow Dispatch to report an unconscious person, which was Xana. In the 911 call, which has now been released, you can hear Bethany hysterically crying, saying that something has happened in their home, but they don't know what, which is when one of her friends takes over the call and claimed that there was an unconscious person in the house who was not breathing. Now, what we know now is that Dylan and Bethany had called their friends Hunter and Emily, who were dating, and they said that they were nervous because no one in the house was waking up. Dylan and Bethany were texting the other roommates, they were calling the other roommates, but they weren't getting any answer. And the reason that this made them even more nervous than normal was because in the early morning hours of November 13th, Dylan had come across an unknown male walking through the home. And we will get into the details of all of that in a moment. But what we know is that because of this, Emily and Hunter went over to the house on King Road to see what was going on. And when Hunter began walking throughout the home and walked into Xana's bedroom and saw Xana laying on the floor, he ordered the girls to call 911 immediately. Now, when Moscow police arrived within minutes after the 911 call, they walked through the front door of the home, which again was on that first floor, the bottom level of the home. Now, initially upon doing that, everything seemed quite normal. Everything was intact. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. That first bottom floor was very much untouched. So they then walked up to the second floor, but this is when they realized that something was incredibly wrong. Now, when police walked onto the second floor of the house and specifically walked into Xana's bedroom, that is when they discovered Xana and Ethan stabbed to death and laying in a pool of blood. The crime scene itself was so incredibly vicious that there was blood seeping out of the walls of the home. If you're familiar with this case, then you have probably seen the pictures of that. After discovering Ethan and Xana's bodies, police then walked to the third level of the home where Maddie and Kaylee's bedroom was. They first heard a dog barking in what used to be Kaylee's room, and when they did, they opened the door and discovered Kaylee's dog Murphy had been locked in Kaylee's old bedroom by himself. Now, police then walked into Maddie's room, and that is when they discovered Maddie and Kaylee laying dead in bed, stabbed to death. The medical examiner who conducted the autopsies have said that all four of the victims were stabbed to death, and there was also no sign of sexual assault on any of the victims. Now, immediately, the Moscow police, when they realized the scope and the gravity of what this case was becoming, they called in the FBI and the Idaho State Police for assistance in solving this case. And as we know, as we've seen over the years, this was an all hands on deck situation. And initially, no one knew what had happened to these four. And because there were so many questions and not any answers in the beginning, the police were keeping this case under very tight wraps. Because no one knew what happened, it led to people coming up with every possible theory that they could. There were theories about the girls, Maddie and Kaylee, being followed after they went out that night. There were theories that the girls were being followed at the grub truck that they were at. People were analyzing that surveillance footage, there were theories of it possibly being a DoorDash driver because Xana had ordered DoorDash in the early morning hours of November 13th. The public also had many questions regarding the surviving roommates in this case. How was it that 4 people in this house were brutally and viciously murdered? However, 2 of the other people in this house survived the attack. A lot of people were struggling understanding why that to be the case. Why was that? And there were really no answers at that point. However, obviously, given the fact that they survived through the murders, the first people the police wanted to talk to in their investigation were the surviving roommates, Dylan and Bethany. Now, regarding Bethany, because her room was on that first bottom floor and more so away from where the murders occurred, we have not quite learned yet what she did or did not know or saw or did not see. We don't know much about what she has told police. That has not been made very public. However, we have learned what Dylan has claimed to have seen and what she told authorities regarding those early morning hours and the time of the murder. Now, according to Dylan, she claimed on the early morning hours of November 13th, everyone was trickling back into the house after their nights out and had arrived home approximately at 2 a.m. and had gone to their rooms to go to sleep afterwards. Dylan claimed that several hours later, at approximately 4 a.m., she began hearing noises coming from upstairs on the 3rd floor where Kaylee and Maddie were. Now, initially, she chalked up the noises to Kaylee playing with her dog Murphy upstairs, so she stuck her head out and tried to see if she could further hear what was going on, but that is when she heard someone say something to the effect of, "There's someone here." Now, Dylan at this point shut her bedroom door. She looked outside her bedroom window. However, she did not see anyone, so she just left it alone. Dylan said that just several moments later, she then heard Xana crying from her bedroom across the hall, and a man, an unknown male voice, say something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Now, it is believed that Xana was attacked first, followed by Ethan, who was presumed to be sleeping during the time of his murder in Xana's bed. Now, Dylan said that in the midst of this, she opened her bedroom door again and stood in the doorway of her bedroom, which is when she claimed an unknown male walked right past her. She claimed she did not recognize this man and that he was wearing a ski mask covering his mouth and nose. She described the man as 5'10" or taller. He was athletically built and had bushy eyebrows. She said he had very distinct bushy eyebrows, and she watched as the man walked right past her and straight out of the home. Now, Dylan just stood there in silence. She did not say anything to the man. She did not make any noise, not a sound, and many people believe that Dylan's silence is what ultimately saved her life. Now, when the man walked out of the house, Dylan, who did not know what just happened, she then locked herself back in her bedroom and she began texting the other roommates in the house. At 4:22 a.m., we know that Dylan texted Bethany saying, quote, "No one is answering. I'm really confused right now." She then explained to Bethany that she saw a man wearing a ski mask that was covering his mouth and nose, and she expressed how unsettled she was. Now, at this point, Bethany texted Dylan to run downstairs to her room. Dylan told authorities that on her way to Bethany's room, she ran past Xana's bedroom and she turned her head to just peek into the bedroom. She didn't go into the bedroom. She was just looking from across the hall, and she saw Xana lying face down on the floor with her head turned towards the wall. So Xana's face was not facing Dylan. It was facing in the opposite direction. And Dylan assumed at that time that Xana was just drunk and sleeping, so she just continued back down to Bethany's bedroom. At that point, when Dylan and Bethany were together, they then began texting the other roommates, however, obviously did not get an answer. Now, ultimately, Dylan and Bethany both fell asleep, and at 7:30 in the morning, they were both awake. Bethany called her dad just just to have a check-in that morning, and by 8 a.m., Dylan was also on Instagram. During this time, they were continuing to text the other girls, saying things like, "Please answer." However, no one else was responding. It was at this time that Dylan and Bethany reached out to Hunter and Emily, asking them to come over because they were concerned about their roommates. Now, something else that police did in the beginning of the investigation is that they asked the neighbors of the King Road residents for any and all surveillance, security, or ring camera footage that they had during the time of the murders. Police were able to narrow down, with the help of the medical examiner, the time frame that they believe the murders took place in. They believe that all of the roommates were murdered sometime between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. This was further confirmed because they were able to see that Xana got a DoorDash order sometime around 4 a.m. and they also saw that Xana was scrolling on TikTok at around 4:12 a.m. So police were asking the neighbors for any sort of surveillance footage that they had during that time. That way they could see if there was any suspicious behavior or activity going on around that time frame. Now, because this was not a high trafficked road, King Road was not a high traffic road, and because it was a time of night where there weren't many cars out, luckily it did help police spot a vehicle that they believed was a little suspicious. They identified a 2011 to 2016 white Hyundai Elantra car. They also noticed that the car did not have a front license plate, it only had a back license plate. Now, police noticed that this specific car had been seen circling the area at 3:30 a.m. on November 13th, and over the next 30 minutes, it's seen circling the block several times. Now, at 4:07 a.m., there was a specific neighbor that caught this car driving away from the King Road residence. However, once it reaches the end of the street, it does a U-turn and drives back in the direction of the home. Police and detectives believe that this specific U-turn was made when the killer finally convinced himself that it was time to do what he was planning to do all along. They believe that the circling of the property was the killer trying to talk himself into finally going into the house. It was him hyping himself up. It was him convincing himself that this was the time. Now, at 4:20 a.m., so just 13 minutes after the car was last seen, the car was seen again speeding in the opposite direction away from the King Road residence, as if it was trying to get out of there in a hurry. Now, 2 weeks after the investigation, so on November 29th, there was an officer who was driving through the University of Washington. Now, the University of Washington is only located 10 minutes away from the University of Idaho because, like I said, Moscow is very close to that state border. And when the specific officer was driving through the parking lot of the University of Washington, they spotted a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra, and this car had no front license plate, similar to the one found on the surveillance footage. Now, as you can imagine, because of the nature of this case, police were all very well informed of this white Elantra car. Everyone was on the lookout for it from the law enforcement side of things. Law enforcement was out looking for this car. And when they saw the white Hyundai Elantra that matched the same year that they were looking for and had no front license plate, it spiked police's interest. They saw that the car had a Pennsylvania license plate, which is where it is legal to not have a front license plate. So it had a Pennsylvania back license plate, and the officer ran the back plate of the car, and that is when it was discovered that this car was registered to a man named Brian Christopher Kohberger. Police immediately noticed through his driver's license photo that he did match the physical description that Dylan had given authorities. He was tall, he had an athletic build, and distinctly bushy eyebrows. So, who is Brian Kohberger? Thank you guys so much for sticking till the end of part 1 of this episode. Make sure you stay tuned for part 2, which will be released next week. I'll see you then.